Yep, we're live. Namaste. Welcome back to. I don't even have a name for this show actually. So let's say the Nameless Podcast. So my first ever video podcast was with Anurag Saxena and Jesai Deepak, where we started talking about this ecosystem. So when we were discussing the ecosystem, obviously phase one of the ecosystem were the doers, so like folks like Anurag, Jesai Deepak, Amit Thadani and Anjana Thadani. We had spoken about them too. I regrettably have to add myself in that section too, where we get our hands dirty, we get on the ground, or we pick an issue and we go on the ground and we try to follow it up. Then obviously part two of that was within the ecosystem. We talk about the digital media platforms, right? So I had Nupur and Sunanda on, and we were discussing the role Op India, Mind Makers, and various other portals are playing. So obviously that whole ecosystem will not be complete, or that discussion cannot be completed until and unless I don't talk about YouTube and how YouTube has played a role and how these media platforms now are coming up. So it's my pleasure today because my guest today is actually the only one who's doing this when it comes to political news, or following up with these kinds of things, or having a dedicated channel that actually talks about if not daily politics, at least weekly stuff. So welcome to the show, Sham.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me on.
No, it's actually the pleasure is on mine, and as of now, क्या बोलते हैं कि you're the only guy who's doing it. So my first question to you is, why did you decide? Because once we were having a discussion on a phone call, and you told me that you're actually very new to Twitter too. So, मतलब, what made you change your mind? I mean, as if I remember correctly, you told me I was just on Twitter for soccer. So, मतलब,
Yep.
football. So this journey from football to outrage, how did that happen?
So it's it's a good question because I grew up in a sort of more politically conscious family. My dad and mom all have always had an interest in it, and as a result of that, I've always had an interest in it. But the interesting thing was that all we did, my parents and me, all we did was we had a great interest in it, and we talk about it, but we talk about it amongst ourselves, and then my dad would go talk to his friends, my mom would go talk to her friends, and then I would talk to my friends. So it was a very small group in which we were having these conversations and we were having these discussions. And then one day, I saw just the way the deck is stacked against people who are sort of speaking against the popular narrative that has existed in India for a while. And so I said, yeah, talking to your immediate family and your immediate friends is great and all, but what is that going to ultimately achieve or change? And I said, I don't know if I'll be able to change anything necessarily, but what I'd like to do is try and see if the things that I'm talking about or the things that I'm interested in are things that would interest other people as well. And so that is literally why I decided just to see if there are more people out there who'd be interested in something like this, and to create some sort of, like, we use the word ecosystem so much that it's been battered and bruised a little bit, but it's an important word that to see if it's possible to create an ecosystem where the other side of the aisle, if you want to call it right wing, that's fine for now, but the other side of the aisle can present its opinions, can present its voices, not in a screamy, shouty way, but in a slightly more coherent way where people can watch it and be like, okay, so they're not all crazy. So that's the attempt, and that's why I first got into it.
Okay, now one very obvious fact, once I try to ask this question. I did this with Sunanda and Nupur too.
Yeah.
If somebody comes to your channel to consume news or to consume information in general, so the first question I always like to ask them, let's say I'm a consumer, right? Let's say I go to your channel and I want to consume your content, but obviously on YouTube you cannot explain more about you, where you stand politically, or even let's say we abandon the left wing right wing ideology, but let's say big issues like how much role the government should play, or what's your view on social issues and stuff like that. So where would you place yourself on those specific issues? Let's say, there could well be someone whom you call a left winger who might be
Yeah.
interested in your content, right? So
Yeah.
I always and because when we had the discussion, because Op India is very libertarian,
Yeah.
Mindmakers is not. So even within the so-called internet right wing, we have this variation. So where would you place yourself in this entire
It's a hard one, isn't it? It's a hard one for me to sometimes define, because there are certain things that I like about the so-called liberal and the liberal thinking, because whether we like it or not, a lot of the social causes were initially pushed by these people. So as much as we like to disagree with them, and as much as I disagree with them, and I think that they've gone a little bit too far, there's a lot of things that I like about them. They're the ones today making the big push for sort of making gay marriage legal again, and that's something that I completely resonate with, completely identify with, and completely agree with. So there's things on social issues that I agree with the so-called liberals, and there are things on social issues that I agree with the so-called right wing. Like the fact that Hindus there does exist a strong bias against Hindus, and that's something that we need to fight. So it's sometimes very difficult for me to place in terms of like a clear ideology where I stand, where like, okay, everything I think is you can find on this side, which is hard for me to do. But more or less, I tend to stand on the side that I identify myself as a Hindu, and as a Hindu, I like to see myself as liberal, and then caring about issues that help, or maybe better the Hindu existence. Essentially, that's the best way I can put it. I find it hard to classify myself in like one area, even though sometimes I talk about right-wing issues and I mention right-wing stuff, because it's just a good way to, I think, tag your show initially.
Yeah, but isn't that a problem too? Because I always say labels matter a lot. Recently, Bansi Juluri wrote an article, I forgot on which portal that was, so please forgive me for that. But he said that we should not use terminologies like left wing or right wing. Hindu is enough. I
Yeah.
actually kind of disagree on that. I'm not saying use left wing or right wing. But what I'm saying is be more specific when you address yourself. Like, I mean, if somebody says I'm Hindu, like, okay, what am I supposed to make out of that? Where do you stand on anything then?
Yeah.
So either I'm Hindu and on the big five social issues or the big five political issues, this is where I stand. And I can understand that you're not a hardcore BJP voter. When it comes to in India, we have two political options basically. You have Congress and you have BJP, or NDA or UPA, however you want to classify it. But here's the thing: labels do matter. Like, if I'm very clear, every time somebody might go on my Twitter timeline and say, "यार ये BJP को गालियां देता रहता है हर थोड़े दिन के बाद." But I'm crystal clear who I'm voting for. I make it a point before I talk to someone who identifies as a left winger. I always tell them, like, look, I'm a BJP voter, and these are my reasons why I'm going to vote for BJP. And now let us have a discussion, because I hate this. Some people claim to have this veneer of supremacy because they are too unclear about their voting option every single election. I think that doesn't make you superior. I think neutrality is highly overrated. I mean, I could be as neutral and as compassionate in spite of, I could be a BJP voter and still be compassionate. So that's why I feel labels matter a lot. I'm saying don't call yourself a left winger, don't call yourself a right winger, but you live in a democracy, you live in a global world where everything is divided on those lines. And there may not be a homogeneous global right wing, because right wing is directly related to every single culture's religious identity. But there is a homogenized global left wing. The left wing in the West and the left wing in India think exactly the same. It's just the identities change according to the minority majority nexus. But the way they play the oppression Olympics, the identity politics, it's just that, in America, it's the Christian majority that is being bashed, and in India, it's the Hindu majority that's getting bashed. That's all the changes, but the template is the same. Now, for us Hindus, obviously, we have a larger problem. As we say, we are like that vegetable khichdi. Everything is added in it. But
Yeah.
in spite of that, I would like to know, in your khichdi, do you like peanuts or not? How
Yeah.
do I serve you? How do I serve my viewer? Like, my viewer who's coming into my channel knows that this is an atheist, this is a Cārvāka. He only follows a certain way of thinking, but he's open-minded. He'll listen to you. So where do you stand on this? I hope you get what I'm trying to say.
No, I do. And the people that say that they're completely neutral are essentially lying to you, because there's no such thing. At least in my experience with people and myself, there's no such thing as complete neutrality. You can't just be neutral about everything. It's impossible. Everybody has opinions about something. Even if it's a flavor of ice cream, everybody has an opinion and a bias about something, and I have mine. And like yourself, I might not like certain things that the BJP does or doesn't do. But at the end of the day, even when people ask me, I tell them that, look, in today's landscape, there's no other option. There's just no other option in today's landscape other than voting for that party. That's, again, my opinion. So that's where I agree with you as well. And that's why when I tag my show, I tag it as a right-wing show, because people need to understand, just if I say just a Hindu show, what does that mean? Am I going to talk politics? Am I going to talk cultural issues? Or am I just going to talk about, oh, these are Hindu concepts? So I need to make sure that the people who are looking at the show, or people who are coming to watch the show, know at least some sort of an ideological framework that the show has. And that is why I tag myself that way. Maybe in the future, we'll be able to define what exactly, when we call ourselves, okay, no, we're not right-wing, we're not left-wing, we're Hindu. Maybe in the future, hopefully, we'll be able to define it very clearly as to what it is. So when anybody says that this is a Hindu platform, when anybody says that this is a Hindu YouTube channel, they know, boom, exactly, okay, this is what that means. At the moment, I think we're still trying to figure out what that definition is. I think a lot of people have different opinions about that. Once we have at least 5 or 6 clear points that everybody is now agreed on, and it's out there, I feel like that's when the shift from sort of right-wing to Hindu can be made. But for the moment, we don't really have any other frameworks that we can put to it. And that is why I use that framework still.
I think that's a fair enough assessment. And that's why I always say, I think the safest answer when somebody asks me, what are you? I say I'm non-left. So
yeah, that's a good way to put it. That's a very good way to put it.
So because I always use the atheistic analogy. Like a lot of times people come and say, "Oh, atheist." What does atheist mean? It literally means not a theist. That's all. It's a negation. So basically, you're negating a lot of things that the left believes in. So that's what I say. There is a very obvious left-wing ideology worldwide. Myself as a person, I don't associate with at least 70% of what they believe. 30% of what they believe, I actually agree with them.
Yeah.
A lot of social issues that the left talks about, I am in agreement with them. I am socially very open-minded. I think anybody and everybody should be allowed to do what they want to do. Now, somebody from the Hindu side can rebut to me and say, hey, Hinduism is liberal. So why would you say the leftists are liberal? I'm not saying the Hindus are not liberal. I'm saying what the leftists claim as their thought process, 30% of that I could agree with. And another thing which I find problematic is if we say I'm a Hindu and I'm on the Hindu camp, then this is again, we are excluding a huge chunk of voters in India that are Congress voters. They're also Hindu.
They're also Hindu.
So I don't get it. How can you alienate them? I mean, are you trying to say that every single Congress voter that goes out and votes for the Congress party loves Rahul Gandhi or loves Sonia Gandhi? They might have they might have their own thing. They might have their own pet peeve. So
and there's a lot of like this localized sort of identification with the local leaders as well. A lot of people just vote for their local leaders, not necessarily for the Congress party as well.
Oh yeah, abhi a recent the Palghar bypoll, right?
Yeah.
The guy who stood on the BJP ticket in the Palghar bypoll, recently Maharashtra mein, the elections we had, that guy was not a BJP guy. He actually came in the BJP. Now, a lot of his
Oh,
voters, if he would have not been in the BJP, they would have voted for him. It's like, he would have stood for a lamppost party, they would have voted for him. The point
right.
is, the BJP poached him. Now he's in the BJP, so BJP wins. Now, what do you call those people? They just go with that individual. You actually have made a very vital point. It is actually because, in a way, India is so feudal. A lot of these things are very personality driven. So it's not
Yeah.
ideology. Indian politics is not ideology driven. It is personality driven.
Yeah. You see, in Bihar, so many Hindus always talk about, Arey, we have to, Virat Hindu, United Hindu, and BJP ko power mein lana hai. Then they'll turn around and vote for Nitish Kumar. So, kar lo, le आओ power में BJP को.
Yeah, it's actually true. Okay, now I wanted to pick up something very specific. So, when we go through your channel, obviously this is how I was able to analyze your channel as of now. So you have your live chats, obviously, where you've called me too, and you call a lot of interesting people. By the way, guys, tomorrow he's going to have probably one of the most interesting guys. Anurag Saxena is going to be live with Sham tomorrow, so please go check it out. But obviously, you have that section. You have the live chat section where something like this is happening. Then what I've seen is you pick one political issue, or it could be a global issue, it could be a local issue, and you speak about that. But something really caught my eye, what you're doing on your channel, and everybody should go and watch it. It's very interesting. You started this segment called The Teachers of India. Can you talk a bit about that?
Yeah, I started this for a very particular reason as well. And one of the reasons when I started my channel is I wanted to talk about political stuff. But within like a month or so of doing that, I realized that, you know, day-to-day politics is important and all. But at the end of the day, what my interest is in is, sort of bigger civilizational issues and pride and developing a sense of pride among Hindus. We've had a period of time in our history where our pride's been very deliberately neutered. So we've had a generation of people that will be like, oh yeah, Are, we support India in cricket matches all the time. And they'll go to the stadiums and they'll shout, India ab jeetega, abhi jeetega. And but outside of that, when you talk to them about India, what it means to be an Indian, what it means to be a Hindu, what are you proud of? They will say we're proud of our composite culture. That's the first response. We're proud of that India is a secular country, and that's a very great thing to be proud of. But in terms of what we take a lot of pride in being a Hindu and in our civilization and the contributions that our civilizations have made, there's a strange gap there. I mean, there's not a lot of things that people know, including myself. One of the reasons that I do this show, that I do this segment, is so that I can learn about these things. Okay, because when I started reading about Varamihir, I was like, oh man, I did not even know this. I want to make sure that other people are able to know this as well, just the way I learned this myself. So that's one of the big reasons why I do it, and that's one of the big reasons why I do another segment on the show that I don't know if you saw or didn't. It's called Defenders of India series, where I talk about important kings and important military commanders of India that in very difficult and in very oppressive circumstances, they just said, this is my life's mission now. This is my goal. My goal is to free at least India, or at least my area, from the Islamic yoke. And so that's something that has always generated a lot of pride in me. And so I'm hoping that through this series, it can help generate pride in other people that see themselves as Hindu, that want to know more about this stuff. So that's, with pride comes a lot of important things. If you don't like, and if you don't take pride in who you are and where you are, then it's hard to get going, and it's hard to be motivated towards doing something about it. So one of my first things is to develop pride. And if we can build that first, then a lot of good things can come after.
Yeah, you make a very important point, because I think, at least with the educated Indian middle class and above, there is
Yeah.
a major section in India, and it's a growing section in India, that is actually very confused. I get the aspect that I'm hosting this discussion and we're having this discussion in actually in a language which is not basically born or created in our own land, but that's fine. But I don't know how to put it, but there is a difference in speaking English and being English. I think we can take. I mean, I'm not saying we don't absorb any values from the West. I think there are some fantastic values that we can absorb from the West, and we should. I mean, at least the current Westminster style of governance is a Western concept. I mean, we may not like to admit it, but it is. I mean, I'm waiting for that one person who's going to point out those 3 verses in the Atharva Veda and say, we had that in India too.
Yeah. What is that? What is that they always bring up? People always bring up Vaishali or something, right? That was like a democratic system.
Yeah,
Vaishali? Yeah.
I know the 3 specific verses too, but let's not get into that. But what I'm trying to say is, okay, fair enough. There was some small village, because that's what it must be at that time, or a small kingdom, whatever, that thought of, that the king could be selected. But I think democracy is a lot more than that, and we've come a long way. And I'm not saying this is the end all and be all. The game has just started. At least for me, it's just 300 years then that we've come up. But we can develop on this. I certainly believe democracy can be improved. We could start some experiments. I think Gandhi's fetish with the village life was very dangerous, and it has destroyed India. But Gandhi also had a fetish of deep libertarianism. Gandhi, in that sense, he was always up for that the villages should decide for themselves, or individuals should decide for themselves. I think the 72nd and the 73rd Amendment were something about more people being more participatory in their governance, and those things could be done. But like you said, it's all good, but we need to have an ethos. What is that thing that binds me with the Southern Indian? What is it? I mean, I am all the way from Punjab. I mean, I'm born in Mumbai. That's a separate issue. But let's say if there is a Punjabi in Punjab and he's having a conversation with someone in Tamil Nadu, the least we could do is, growing up, I should know 4 major Southern Indian heroes. The Southern Indian guys and gals, they should know 4 to 5 major Northern Indian, Northeastern heroes. And I think even Swarajya does something very nice. They once in a while, Swarajya will have an article about some hero in the Northeast or from Bengal. And like I'll give you another amazing example. When I read Meenakshi Jain's book on Sati, in that, not only was Raja Ram Mohan Roy's name mentioned about, reformers within India who were against Sati, there were 4 or 5 other names, which I, as someone who reads so much, did not know about. Imagine, I did not know about it. I freaking read 4 books a month, and I had no clue about it. And I was like, wow, I got to learn something. So when you decide, it's like, is there a method like, okay, I want to pick this up? Or do you have something in your mind when you decide to talk about a particular king, or like, do you plan it out? I'm going to go from this region to that region, or it's just that, yaar, maine pakad liya, and I'll go from there. Well, how do you make your decision when you decide I'm going to talk about this guy?
Yeah, it's a good question, because I make the same. I have the same sort of idea when I'm picking out these things. Is because, and it's the same idea that I've had when I decided to make the show in English rather than Hindi. I have been told countless times in the comment section and on Twitter that, Sham, you have to make the show in Hindi. That is the only way that your channel will grow big. That is the only way that your channel will rival the people like Dhruv Rathi and all the others, people that make the show in Hindi. And I completely understand, because they're coming from a place of affection. They want my channel to grow, and that's why they're giving me that advice. So I completely appreciate that. But at the same time, I think to myself that one of the first episodes that I made, I got a comment under that episode, was this guy from, I think he was from Tamil Nadu, and he left a message under my video saying that, I've never had a channel that talks about sort of Hindu dharmic issues, but does it in English, because there are so many Hindi channels and I have no idea what they're saying. So I appreciate the fact that you're making this in English, and that resonated with me so much, because the thing is, the Hindi belt is not India, and the Hindi belt is not Hindustan, and that's not the extent of the Hindus in India. So that's why I make the show in English, and that's why I pick the people that I pick. I did on the Defenders of India series, my last 2 episodes were Krishna Dev Rai from the Vijayanagar kingdom, and latest one was Lachit Borphukan from Assam. So that's why I choose the people that I choose, because there are heroes that Indians need to know about that they don't know about. I made a video on Krishna Dev Rai, and so many people said, I've never heard of this guy before. I made a video on Lachit Borphukan, and so many people said, I have never heard of this guy before, but what a fantastic hero. And so that's the reason that I pick these people, because that's one consideration, because there's an India and there's Hindus outside of the Hindi belt. And second reason is I pick people that generate a sense of pride in me. When I read their stories, I feel very proud. So I always wonder that if I actually share the story, how many other people will feel that way? If those stories can generate so much pride in me about being a Hindu, then maybe it can generate some pride in other people as well. And like I said again, pride is the first stepping stone. Once we can accomplish pride within the people, we can accomplish a lot of things.
Yeah, the only caveat I will add is pride minus the Pushpak Viman.
Oh yeah, 100%. Because that's one of the good reasons as well. Like, that's a secondary reason, but that's definitely a reason as well. Is we talk about that pendulum theory, right? That in the past few decades, the pendulum has shifted so much by the leftists to one side, that India is useless, they've never produced anything, they're a slave nation, so on and so forth. That once the Hindus started finding their voice, they took the pendulum to the other side. We invented internet, we invented nuclear bombs, we invented airplanes, we invented everything that mankind has today. So we took it to the other extreme. And I feel like I want to bring it somewhere in the middle. That, yeah, of course we've given the world so much stuff, but it's also possible that India has not invented everything on the planet. So through the discovery of our heroes, through the discovery of our teachers, we will learn those things, hopefully.
One guy you should actually try to research on is Raja Dahir.
Okay.
Ibn Qasim, when he came, the guy who fought with him, Sindh ka Raja tha wo,
Right.
and he fought against Ibn Qasim. I would actually help you out in the research material.
Okay.
If you want me to. But I think he was the first guy. I don't think so we give him enough credit, because we don't realize that actually Islamic rule in India, it established itself, I think, around 1000 to 1200, right? In that period. But Ibn Qasim came at a long time ago. He came at 710, and one of the first few incursions were beaten, and Raja Dahir actually fought a lot. वो सिंध का जो राजा था. And there are these short stories within our history. Obviously, I mean, we also have fools like Prithviraj Chauhan, who basically sent him back 14 or 13 times.
Yeah.
I think that should be called a psychological syndrome. I call that the Prithviraj syndrome.
Yeah.
It's a retarded way of thinking. I mean, ye kya? It's psychotic. But yeah, it's good what you're doing, and hopefully, you keep on continuing. And in fact, all the people who are going to watch this, how about this? You should think about good people you would want Sham to do a segment on. How about that? So you can write in the comment section, or you can, contact Sham on Twitter or on Facebook or wherever you know Sham from, and you tell him, and basically you can build this thing with him. Why should all the content development be done by Sham? Like I offered, right? I could help him out with Dahir. Okay, somebody said Raja Dahir's original name was Dadi Raj. Actually, Tejasvi, I know his name was Dadi Raj, but Raja Dahir is something that is, the common name. Everybody knows that. So we
it's like Porus, a lot of people say, oh, his real name is Purushottam, but Porus is what people know, most people.
Yeah, that's the thing.
It's like that. Yeah.
Oh, by the way, Amit Thadani really likes you. So Amit says, I like Sham's videos because he packs so much info in a capsule and very well presented. Kushal, that Prithviraj story is a fake. He did not capture Ghori even once. Amit, there are two ways of it. So the historical records don't say it, but if you look at the folk records, they do say it, by the way. So there is a conflict in that. And I will not talk out of my ass.
Only I do that.
Okay, now let's move on to other issues.
Thank you to Amit, first of all. Thank you very much, Amit.
Yeah, you can troll Amit whenever you want to, by the way.
Okay, will do.
The only reason Amit is on Twitter is so that he can praise me, for the record.
Good.
So, okay, now I wanted to talk about a little bit of politics now. See, obviously, your show is a political show. So, what do you make of the current political scenario? So, when I say the current political scenario is, what do you think about the current government in power, which is obviously, the Bharatiya Janata Party-led National Democratic Alliance? And
Yeah.
second, what would you think bothers you the most about politics in India in general?
Oh, good question, man. Well, what I think about the BJP, I think I've hinted at that earlier as well. I think it's, at least as far as I'm concerned, it is the only option, because it is the only option, that it is the only party that, in my opinion, is not, again, my opinion, is not willing to, have the country burn in front of their eyes or be destroyed or be sold in order to hold on to power. I think there's an aspect of that for sure. People can argue that the BJP is also willing to do those things. There might be an aspect of that, but it is, for me, the best option right now. We've seen the Congress party and we've seen how poisonous that party is, unfortunately. So for me, it is the best option right now. Of course, there are things we can, criticize the BJP about. One of the things that we can really go after the BJP about is the Kashmir issue, because they always, especially the Kashmiri Hindu issue, because they talk and they talk and they talk and they talk a lot about how they care so much about Kashmiri Hindus and how the plight of the Kashmiri Hindus is a blot on Indian democracy, and we should do whatever we can to help the Kashmiri Hindus. But how much have we done really? How much has the government done really, like tangibly, to be able to take care of the Kashmiri Hindus? I was talking to Ashish Dhar on the last episode. I had him on my show, and he said that the Kashmiri Hindu population in India is so scattered that they're having trouble, maintaining their cultural fabric, maintaining their traditions, maintaining their culture, essentially. So, and that's heartbreaking. That's a culture that has provided so much to India. So that's very heartbreaking to see that. So that's something we can definitely go after the BJP for. But I think at the end of the day, it also comes down to the people. When it comes to what I hate about Indian politics today is apathy. But that's one of the biggest things that I dislike, is just complete apathy. We're more than happy, and I'm guilty of this myself. So I'm in that group. We are more than happy to scream and shout on Twitter and retweet and post nasty comments and, in quotes, destroy people on Twitter, but we don't want to really do anything about it. Once we post that angry tweet, once we share that Facebook post, we think our job is done, and we think India is now in safe hands once we have shared that Facebook post. So we need to overcome our sense of apathy. That sense of apathy has brought us to where we are today in a large measure. So we need to fix that sense of apathy. And people like Anurag Saxena, people that are doing all of this work, obviously give me a lot of hope, because now people are actually taking things into their own hands. And I think that needs to happen on a much larger scale. What we have tended to do is rely too much on the government to fix everything for us. That's an old problem for us, and we need to fix that. We need to be like, okay, no, we don't have to rely on everything on the government. There are certain things that we can take into our own hands, create some ground roots sort of movements, create some people pressure on the government, and maybe we can force the government to do certain things. So I think if you would ask what is my biggest problem, I would say apathy, public apathy.
Okay, on Anurag Saxena, what hurts me the most? Guess what? Who raises the question in the parliament about Anurag?
Yeah.
AIDMK.
Really?
Yes.
Oh,
Congress.
I thought the answer was no one.
Congress.
Wow.
Guess what? BJP doesn't do it.
But he was talking in one of his chats about how the BJP government has been like bringing these stolen artifacts back in a much larger number.
Yeah, overall yes, but
okay.
See, again, This is where BJP loses the larger picture, in my view. And I'm able to have this discussion with you, and I'll tell you why I'm having this discussion with you. Some of us will have to occupy the idea space.
Yeah.
And I have genuine hopes from guys like you. Sometimes I felt I was really alone in this space, because while I might be fiercely, pro BJP when it comes to the ballot box, like I will go and press the Kamal and come out. But there is a lot of areas that we have problems in this country. I'll give you an example. Look at the SC/ST bill they are discussing. They are going to be discussing in the next 5 days in the goddamn parliament. Who's bringing that bill? It's the BJP. You accuse Congress of being pseudo-secular. You accuse Congress of playing identity politics. What the hell is this SC/ST bill? It is identity politics. I mean, look at the, you stay in America right now. So, you hear this word, America has a diversity fetish. We're so diverse. We're so diverse. Nobody on planet Earth is more diverse than our goddamn country.
Yep.
So many languages, so many food options. I don't know how many goddamn states based on whatever possible combinations. It is actually, I think it is dangerously diverse, India. We could do with a little less diversity sometimes. I don't understand. The food changes in 100 kilometers.
Yep.
So, it's that diverse. But when you have such a diverse society and you have such a left-wing outlook, imagine you're going to get the worst of identity politics in India. So let us look at the different slots. For example, we have the Northern Indian and Southern Indian identity politics. Then we have the Northeastern identity politics. Then we have the bloody fake Aryan and Dravidian identity politics. I don't know what. We are the same DNA. We are still Aryan and Dravidian. I don't know. We deny science. We are all science deniers. Then you have the Marathi identity politics, the Gujarati identity politics, then the Tamil identity politics. So you have linguistic. Now you keep on adding it. Then you have within Hindus, you have Jativad. Then you have the Jati identity politics. Then you have the Hindu, Muslim, Christian identity politics. You won't believe it. Even within the Christians, there is the Protestant and the Catholic identity politics.
Yeah, even within the Muslims, you have different kind of these.
The Ashraf identity politics, the Qureshi identity. It is beyond control if we do not destroy this edifice of identity politics. We are going to be screwed. And every time I ask this question, and there are some well-meaning people, believe me, I mean, I'll give you names on Twitter. Follow these people, good people. You should have them on the show also. Somebody like Mukul Agarwal. He's the most balanced human being you'll meet in your life. He's a hardcore BJP supporter. But I always tell Mukul bhai, what's the point? At the end of the day, the BJP plays the same identity politics game. They just flip it. They appease the Hindus. Now, as a Hindu, I don't want to be appeased. I want to be left alone.
Yeah. I mean, I think some Hindus would like to be appeased, but the same thing applies to the agricultural stuff as well. Remember, if you saw the BJP's manifesto, at least in terms of agriculture in Karnataka, if you remove BJP's name from it, you wouldn't be able to, you would probably think it's a Congress manifesto. It's the same stuff about, सारा फार्म का लोन जितना भी है सब माफ कर देंगे, आपको कुछ पैसा वापस करने की जरूरत नहीं है, आप बस अपना काम करते रहो, पैसा हम देख लेंगे. That is a very Congressy system. That's a very leftist. That's a very, very leftist policy, and that's in a BJP manifesto. So, I mean, there's an argument that people raise that the BJP has to do something like this, because it still doesn't have a base or a control in the narrative so strongly that it can make decisions that it wants to necessarily make in every sphere. And I guess there's some merit to that fact. I can see that. But at the same time, the question that you would raise probably is that when do we start taking these hard decisions, right?
Yeah, and see, this is where folks like, I believe you and I, we have to play a role here. And there are many along with us. We have to take the unpopular route. I know I'm going to piss off a lot of, some of them are my friends on Twitter. I've met them offline. I hang out with them. I have dinners with them. But I have to say, you've played a huge role in screwing India by not questioning BJP.
Hmm.
And there is a method to questioning BJP. Nota is not that way. There is something, I have been crying hoarse for the last so many years. Every time I have these tweet ups, we have these so-called tweet ups, and I just say one thing: why don't we write down some issues that bother us? There are 70 Lok Sabha seats that are urban today in India.
Hmm.
They matter a lot. 70
Yeah.
Lok Sabha seats are a lot of seats. We can influence at least some of them at municipal levels now. Why don't we push for serious reforms? Otherwise, how are we going to change? Because your vote doesn't matter otherwise. Then why would you abuse someone like Anand Ranganathan who says main to nota karunga? I'm not a nota person. I would debate
Yeah.
Anand on nota. But the point is, the other side, when I go to them and I tell them, let's work on this. So what I'm trying to say is, I think people like you and I, and many others now, I think even Op India is realizing that, and they're doing it in their own way. Even Mind Makers is doing it. We have to take on that mantle of influencing people. And believe me, enough of us know leaders in the BJP, at least I know at a personal level, and we can
Hmm.
influence them. And believe me, I try to do that. I try to put questions, that could be asked in the parliament of the ministers. But here's the thing: we don't get support from our own people.
Yeah.
Like, I have a significant support base online now. You have a far bigger support base than mine online.
It's just YouTube. YouTube support base is hardly a support base.
No, but at least there are some people, believe me, there are some people who follow you regularly, but even they are not willing to take on the BJP, and taking on the BJP is not abusing at them. And then Sushma Swaraj gets an excuse to say, oh, look at trolls, what trolls are
Hmm.
doing. There is a method and a way. Every time these trolls go after BJP leaders, they actually screw the case for good, sensible people. Now,
Yeah.
Amit does an amazing Twitter series on history textbooks. I don't know if you've checked it out. Yeah, if you have
No, I
not,
haven't.
check it out. Bring Amit on your show and discuss about it.
Okay.
So again, how did Amit get into it? I'm sure Amit must have read his children's textbooks, and he must have realized, what the hell are they teaching my children? So
Yeah.
how do you get involved? Because you have children, you get involved. So now he started going deep into it, and Amit is a voracious reader. Amit reads a lot. So what I'm trying to say is, there are good things we can do. Now, I expect constructive work like this. And this is probably what I'm saying is, people like you and I, we have to occupy that space. And I wish desperately that there were more people doing this kind of work. What do you think? Don't you think that should be our role?
I think so. I think, like we were talking about this earlier, right? That, we've gone from, uh, because we've seen sort of the leftist screech and shout for so many years, that when we found a voice, we went straight to that option. We went straight to the screeching and shouting option, which is good to create noise, to show people that now we have a voice as well. It's good. It worked for the first couple of years. And I think Ashish Dhar again mentioned this very well when I was talking to him. And he said that, okay, it was good for the time that it was used for. For the first couple of years, it was good. Now it's time to lower the noise. Now it's time for the intellectual conversations to come forward. And now it's time that we forget about the moral outrage machine that we've created. It's good for certain situations, but now these people who have that sort of influence, we need to settle down and we need to figure out, okay, point 1, point 2, point 3, point 4, point 5. Okay, these are the points that we need to now sort of rally around, create coherence, argument around, and now we need to start sort of pressuring the government in some way to take cognizance of these issues. And I think it's possible. Like you're saying, I think it's possible. I think we just need platforms where we can solidify these points properly.
Yeah, it's true. I'll give you a very tangible example here. I think it was a few months ago, I read the Law Commission's report on hate speech laws in India. So it basically was a review on 153A, I think. That's what the commission was about. It was around 50 pages, that report. I read it 3-4 times. I took my notes down, and then I left it there because I knew nothing's going to happen. Even if I talk about it, I shared the report online, I shared it with a few people. The point is, there is this great solution, according to Twitter warriors online, who think that if we stop criticism of Hinduism, Hinduism will be saved. No, you morons, it won't be saved.
Yeah,
Have to criticize Islam,
yeah,
save Hinduism.
yeah,
Because first things first, you need to save Muslims from Islam.
yeah. It's true. It's true. People will think, "Oh, what a racist thing to say," but it's true.
No, it's not racist. I mean, if it was racist, I mean, you've spoken to Waleed. I just spoke to him a couple of days ago. And if we were racist or we hated Muslims, we won't do that. We want to talk to them and we want to understand what the hell is happening. We need to
Yeah,
support more of these people. But, if your big solution for reforming or solving our problems is, oh, we will convert 20 crore people from Islam to Hinduism. Yeah, keep dreaming, you idiots.
yeah.
It's not going to
Exactly.
happen.
I mean, look at it this way. Hinduism and Hindu culture has survived for so long, despite the criticisms against it. Along with the criticisms against it, which is the reason why you and I can sit and have a conversation, and somebody who's a devout Muslim and Waleed probably couldn't have that conversation as nicely as we're trying to have that conversation. So criticizing Hinduism is not going to destroy Hinduism. Hinduism is going to be just fine. But if you allow criticism of Hinduism, and along with that, then you lay the groundwork. Look, we're criticizing Hinduism, which means that we should have the right to be able to criticize Islam and Christianity as well. And once we are able to do that, then is when things start unraveling.
Imagine, I mean, look at the fear factor that people have when it comes to Islam. That if you look at the global critique of Islam, hardly anybody from the subcontinent, when I say subcontinent, I mean Bangladesh, Pakistan, India, Sri Lanka,
India.
right? The four major countries. None of the critiques are coming from India other than Taslima Nasreen. And
Yeah.
believe me, I believe Taslima Nasreen and her style of criticism is the worst. It will not
Yeah.
work. It's not going
Who's
to
it
work.
going to influence at the end of the day? Apart from getting a bunch of followers, it's not going to influence a lot of people. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think so. It influences her, let alone anybody else. So that's my problem. Now let us look at the whole intellectual space where Islam is being criticized in different ways. Or Tawhidi, Australia, right?
Mhm.
You have Majd Nawaz, England. Then you have Rahil Raza, Irshad Manji, Tariq Fatah. What's this? Ex-Muslim.
The group, yeah.
The
Armin Nawabi, Sarah Haider.
Yeah, Sarah Heather, all of them North America, all of them North America,
Yep.
and Hirsi Ali and all that. You don't have, so imagine this: one of the major populations of Islam worldwide is basically in the subcontinent, and you hardly have any
Quiet.
homegrown criticism of Islam. You
Yeah.
know why? Because there is no free speech in this damn area. You know why they're able to criticize Islam out there? God damn it, they have free speech.
Yeah.
That's why. That's the
That's true.
biggest proof of free speech. Every time I have this argument, they'll be like, "Oh, they will chop your head off." What do you mean they'll chop your head off? So if your counter is they will chop your head off, I say, okay, I'm willing to risk it. Let them chop my head off. Give me free speech. How
Yeah.
about this? You guys don't deserve it. I deserve it because I'm willing to
Yeah.
take the risk. I will get up every morning and I'll pick two Islamic verses and I'll say, look at this. And I don't need to be that ugly atheist like Amos Yee, who humps the Quran or humps the Bible or licks the
Yeah.
Quran or licks the Bible. That's disgusting. Why would you do
Yeah.
it to anything? Let alone a religious text. I mean,
And who
it
is
means
that
a
going
lot
to
to
influence?
people.
Who is that going to
Yeah,
influence?
and what I liked about Waleed, and I actually went and saw his videos. His satire is
It's
actually
really good.
amazing. He's
Yeah.
very good, and I was so happy talking to him. And we need to encourage these people within India. Where
Yeah.
are you telling me there is nobody who says he's an ex-Muslim in India? Give me a freaking break. There has to be. But where are these Indian ex-Muslims? All of these folks, mostly Pakistani. Yeah, by the way, I don't know if you've noticed this. A lot of them, these so-called ex-Muslims, are mostly Pakistanis.
Yeah. They are.
So
That's
basically,
one
according to
thing.
my
That's
logic,
that's one thing right there. Pakistan's better at us.
no. See, the moment they say they're ex-Muslim, they become Indian.
I know. That's what I keep telling Waleed as well.
So what I'm trying to say is, how do we go about this? And why am I having this discussion with you is because this was the whole idea. I mean, for all the people who are going to watch this, whenever live or afterwards, believe me, Sham and I had no agenda before we started this chat. Sham even messaged me, Ki, what do you want to talk about? I was like, you know what? We will only decide to talk about your
We'll
channel,
figure it out.
and we'll figure it out as we go. And the reason I wanted to do this is because I wanted to talk about Islam. And it's okay if two Hindus talk about Islam and its problems. And I'm someone who has family members who are Muslim. So if street cred is required, I have that street credential.
Yeah.
I can talk about Islam. I've got Muslims in my family, and obviously they don't practice Islam, but that's their problem, not mine. Nobody's forced them to do that. Anyway, so how about this? There were a few people who are already asking questions. So before the chat goes way down, let me see if we can start taking questions now. Let me
Okay.
see. कहाँ गया यार? There are so many people. Okay, how is the Indian conservative thought different from Western? I will give my answer later on. Sham, you give the answer first.
I think it's. I think we kind of talked about it earlier quite a bit in detail. You know, that the framework may be very similar. Like Kushal Bhai was saying earlier, that the leftist framework is almost identical across the world, but the sort of conservative framework also has a lot of similar points. But I think where the Hindus differ is I think, again, one of the problems with the conservative movements, but particularly in the West, is it's a very my way or the highway sort of idea, because it is still rooted in, you know, Christianity, and Christianity does have that aspect, even though people might not have that aspect of my way or the highway, but the ideals in which their identity is rooted does have that aspect of, okay, if you're not Christian, then you're not part of us. Hindus, thankfully, do not have that concept. If you're not part of us, that's fine. Don't worry about it. So I think that's such a big. It sounds like a small thing, but it's such a massive differentiating factor that differentiates India from everybody else, because it's a very, very, very liberal concept, and then there's tons of things to criticize Hinduism about. But that is something that gives me a lot of pride, and that is something that I take a lot of pride in, being a so-called Hindu conservative. So I think that's one big point of difference. Whereas if we can, you know, again, just going back to what we were just talking about, that if we can ensure that we can ensure some sort of free speech in our country, then it'll open a whole Pandora's box, because that Indian conservative movement can truly flourish.
Okay, so here's my answer to this question. I don't think so. India has a conservative thought process, first of all.
Yeah.
And when we say conservatism, what do we mean by conservatism? I know I don't want to sound like Jordan Peterson, so I'll clarify the word conservatism. So in the West, when you say conservatism, it comes out of a very Protestant ethic, and you have individualism, and you have fiscal conservatism, and you have social conservatism. So does India have socially conservative people? Absolutely yes. And you could map them bit by bit with the Western social conservatives. Does India have fiscal conservatives? Yes, you can map them bit by bit with Western conservatives. Is there a thing like Indic conservatism? No, there isn't. In my view, there is no such thing as Indic conservatism. What we have in Kautilya is not conservatism. There is some element of a small limited state, but Kautilya, if you read the Arthashastra, there are a lot of authoritarian tendencies within that text too. So it's complicated. What we have is, I think, because we got ruled for such a long time, a lot of thinking or the intellectual work that should be done in developing that lens. Let's say, I'm just thinking out loud, let's say I want to use Jain epistemology of Syadvad and Anekantvad to develop a dialogue on social issues. So what does Anekantvad say? There is a classic example in Jain books, where the elephant is there, and if you tie you tie a putty on the eyes of 5 people and you touch the elephant, you will get 5 different perspectives about the elephant. That is basically the Anekantvad, and from that they have their dialectical way of thinking and debating via Syadvad. Now, How would a Jain use that logic? It's basically they build that logic, and the Buddhists had the Chatushkoti system, and the Upanishads also have their own sense of logic. And what pramanas do we use? So the Indian system has to be built bottom up. And
Yeah.
believe me, it is not there. When I say it's not there, I search for it. You can find few articles in here and there, and some journals here. That's not what I call. Okay, how about this? If you believe they exist there, bring those papers to me. I'll read them. I'll talk to the author, and then we try to have a discussion on that. So if you ask me, there is no such thing as Indian conservative thought. What you have is development made in the West, and Indians or Hindus reacting to it. That's what I believe. There's no such original thought process. Okay, another question somebody asked was, it's okay, I'll ask it anyways. What do you think about the criticism of Arun Shourie and other right-wing intellectuals? How legitimate is it, and how should the right respond to it? Go for it, Sham.
You take this one first. I have a weird answer for this, so you take this one first.
Okay, so some criticisms of Arun Shourie are valid. I think he makes a lot of sense in many areas. Some are outright ridiculous. And when I say that, it hurts me because he's my personal hero. I mean, he was that one intellectual we had key. When somebody would say, what do you have? And we would say, we have Arun Shourie.
Arun Shourie, yeah.
And it hurts. It hurts a lot. But what do? You give up. But yeah, he had some valid criticisms. I think the response to Arun Shourie online from serious Twitter and Facebook or general social media thinkers has been quite measured. And I see a lot of pain when they criticize Arun Shourie. So I don't think so. We've been harsh on it.
I agree. I was going to say something similar as well, is because, my dad always got these Arun Shourie books to read, and, he really liked the work that Arun Shourie did. And so even I remember when Arun Shourie started like saying the stuff that he did, he was just like, what happened? What happened? I think that's a very common reaction among a lot of like Hindu sort of right-wingers, whatever you want to call them, when they hear about what Arun Shourie's been saying, like, what happened? That's a very common reaction to them. And again, like I said, there's the Twitter troll screaming that goes on at him, which everybody will get that no matter what happens. But I think generally speaking, people have criticized him back, but I don't think it's been mean. I don't think most of the reactions to him have been particularly mean or mean-spirited or, bad in that way. He's criticized the government. People have felt he's criticized, a lot of Hindus as well, and people have felt, okay, theek hai, chalo. If that's how you feel, then that's a real shame. But that's how you feel, and we have the right to criticize you back, and that's what people have done. So I mean, that's just how I feel. His mind changed. Fine.
Yeah. So another question: where do you see Arnab in the intellectual space? Arnab and intellectual space.
Arnab came and Arnab's a smart guy. Arnab saw that there was a Fox News shaped hole in Indian news, and he said, "I'll fill it. People need that hole. You see how popular Fox News is in America, and people, and Arnab was like, dude, somebody needs to fill that hole before some other idiot comes along and gets in there. I have to get in there." He made a very smart business decision, and he's reaping the benefits of it. I personally don't really believe that Arnab believes or deeply is convinced by a lot of the stuff that he says, but he's playing a character like a lot of people on Fox News play, and he's filling a hole. So he just made a very good business decision. That's what I make of it.
To me, Arnab was necessary. I dislike his style.
Early Arnab was necessary, I think. Early Arnab was definitely necessary.
Even today, he's necessary because there is a market space for noise. You need noise. And that noise, I think Arnab and social media feed off each other beautifully.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, they're made for each other. It's like, that was the marriage made in heaven, if there exists one.
Or hell.
Whatever. whatever suits them. But I think Arnab was needed. There was a glass ceiling and somebody had to come, take a hammer and just go smash.
Yeah.
And he broke it, and he's break. So credit where it's due. Arnav has done that, but there has to be now that next step where some of us say, okay, calm down, breathe in, breathe out, and let's chat now. So that I think is what my take on Arnav is. I'm not a fan. I don't watch him. I watched him the first few times and I could not stand that shouting. But that's just
Yeah.
me. And some people like shouting, so it's okay. Whatever. Okay, this question. I don't know if you want to answer this. What do you think about the P Gurus gang, Sri Iyer, S Gurumurthy, R Vaidyanathan, etc.? I'm more than happy to give this answer, but if you
I'm sadly not as well versed in the work that they do than I should be. So I'm not a very good person to answer that question.
Okay, so P Gurus, I don't read them, I don't care. I
Okay.
can give you an answer about S. Gurumurthy and R. Vaidyanathan. S.
Okay.
Gurumurthy, fascinating thinker. You should go and see his IIT lectures on Indian entrepreneurship. If you guys have not seen it, please do check it out. They are wonderful. R. Vaidyanathan, I don't agree with a lot of his economics views, which Gurumurthy ji shares, but R. Vaidyanathan is a necessary voice in the Indian system. I think he's a good man, great sense of humor. I love him. You should read his books, his latest book and the one before that, India Unincorporated. I've read them. They are very interesting books. You can reject them on the basis of economics or theories, but he is a voice I believe that is needed. I don't agree with him, but full support to him. So I guess that's what my thing is. Somebody asked a very good question. I think it was Gautam Batra. Sham, this is for you actually. I'll answer it too. But do you
Okay.
think the sensible non-left platforms are guilty of not inviting their left counterparts a voice? Very good question.
I think that's a good question, and I think yes, in a way. I think what people need to do is first establish the platforms properly. And once they are established, I think it definitely will be a good idea to start bringing those people in. The first step is to establish yourself, and then the next step is to have that. And I think some of those platforms are still working out that first step. So I think once we have that first step established, I think the second step, I think most people on the Hindu side should not have any problem with inviting those people and having those conversations with them. I have absolutely no problems. So, yeah, I think let's get the first step sorted out first and then walk into that second step, which is absolutely necessary.
Here's my take on it. I will be talking to left-leaning people. I have friends who are left-leaning. See, you have to understand. Most people don't understand this side of me, that I'm actually far more political than most so-called political people on Twitter. So I have friends who are active members of different political outfits, and a good friend of mine, and I know he's not liked by a lot of Hindus online. He's Ruben Mascarenhas.
Oh, yeah.
He's a spokesperson of Aap Maharashtra, and Ruben and I, in fact, Ruben tells me, "तू कभी मुझे बुला रहा है अपनी podcast पे?" And I'm guilty of not calling Ruben, and it's my fault. I want to chat about Ruben because he's a good guy. We have ideological disagreements. I mean, most people don't get it. Ruben and I meet over dinners. I mean, it's a regular feature. He works in Pune. Sometimes he's dropping by. He goes by my house. He'll call me agar free, and we'll actually have dinner. We'll chit chat. So I actually do want to have a conversation with them, because I hate this, overall image created that everybody who's left leaning is crazy. I don't believe that. I have Congresses
I
in my.
don't believe that either. I don't know how many people truly believe that. That's a good question. Like, how many people truly believe that people that don't agree with you are bad people? I'd be interesting to know what the numbers are
I
there,
think
because I
Quillette,
don't know how many people truly believe that.
no, not a lot of people believe it, but I think Quillette did a very good mathematical analysis of that. What happens is, see, most people are in the center, but centrists don't voice their opinion. So what happens is, on both sides of the spectrum, when there is a disagreement, the violent ones or the most active ones talk. And what
Right.
happens is, the ones who are silent, they usually just go to their corner and they just stick to the gang. So what happens is, the most loud opinion makers, they get support that way. So that is the problem, and this is why I believe people like you and I, and there are few of us online who I don't even call ourselves centrists. We are fiercely ideologically clear, but
Yeah.
we are civilized and we are decent. I just care about civility and decency. My whole thing is, let us bring civility back in the discourse. See, a lot of people here are, asking this question. So I'm just gonna club three or four of them. So
Okay.
what they are saying is, though I have issues with both Sam Harris and Jordan Peterson's thoughts, the level of their debates is fantastic and worth emulating. Why don't we have such debates in India? First, you go for it first.
I think again the same thing that I said earlier, because right now I think a lot of Hindus have realized that we've finally found our voice, and so we want to talk about things that matter to us first, and that's what a lot of them have been doing. I think already we can see people are now slowly starting to go towards that route. It's going to happen slowly, but it's starting to happen. That okay, now that our voice is starting to get established, now we need to start talking to the other side of the aisle and start having conversations. And I believe that will start to happen in the next couple of years. That will start to happen. I feel like in the first, since like 2012, 2013, since the Hindus started finding their voice thanks to social media, they just wanted to make sure that their voice gets established first.
Okay, my answer to this is, why don't we have the level of debates that Sam Harris and Jordan Peterson have? Is because we don't have those kinds of people in India. I know it sounds very bad, but we don't. To become what you are, America, you have to realize America and Canada are rich freaking countries. Do you realize that in the last two debates in England and in Dublin had 8,500 people.
Right.
I forgot the place where they held the debate. 6,500 people. Every ticket is paid for. By the
Yeah.
way, I contribute monthly to Sam Harris.
Mm.
Sitting in India, I am a monthly contributor to Sam Harris because I like his content so much. So imagine the level that society is in. There are people, there are thousands of people weekly paying money, and believe me, the tickets are not cheap. The tickets start from like $15, $20, right up to $1,000, $2,000
Yeah.
for the front row seats. They are a country that is overall intellectually far, far ahead right now in terms of intellectual curiosity, not intellect, curiosity. Over here, there is basically no intellectual curiosity.
I think the thing is that there might be curiosity, and there are people as well. I don't know if you watched that conversation
Another
that I had
Makran,
with.
who's there?
No, I had this conversation with Waleed and Farhan Qureshi. Farhan Qureshi is another guy who was born a Muslim but now is a Hindu, and he had this video on his channel, which was a discussion between. I think he was a Hindu philosopher. His name was something Garg. Maybe I'm getting the name wrong. I'm very bad with names, but it was him and it was Richard Dawkins, and they had such a good conversation with each other, and they were discussing about strict atheism, which is Richard Dawkins, and sort of Hindu philosophy, and how they're not necessarily in combat or conflict with each other. It was a great conversation, and I was just like, okay, so there are people out there with knowledge. I think what the point that you're making is a good point, that there might not be the level of intellectual curiosity that the West has today, and people are just not willing today to put their money where their mouth is the way the West is.
No, no,
I
we
think
cannot
that's a
do
big.
that. Sham, look at my case. I am 37 years old. I stopped studying when I was 22. I came back from Canada.
Yeah.
I became a bania, started doing business. I eventually, today, I just enrolled for a master's in philosophy 2 days ago.
Mm,
Why did I do that? Now, I'm a reasonably well-read person. I've read around 400, 500 books. That's not a
mm,
small amount of books.
mm,
And the books I read are not fiction. They're not stories. I read boring books
mm,
that hardly anybody reads, but I do it. But then, I always felt that, when I would go to a discussion, I don't have that damn degree.
mm,
I'm the first one to admit it. मेरे पास degree नहीं है. So they would not give me that seat at the table. So
I see.
someone who's a very close well-wisher of mine who has done a lot of work with Rajiv Malhotra ji in Mumbai, a lot, when we were working with Rajiv ji, he said, Kushal, get a degree. And I finally heard his advice. And 2 days ago, I was like, okay, screw it. I don't know if I'm going to complete my master's, but at least I'm enrolled to it. What I'm trying to say is that we are a poor country. Also, there is a savings mentality. And I think a lot of money goes into the temples. I keep, I like hard, with my hands folded, I keep telling Hindus, you give the money to the temple these days, at least stop giving 50% of that to the temple. Say you put 10 rupees in the hundi on a weekly basis, start putting 5 rupees in the hundi, start saving that 5 rupees. At the end of the year, if you have 500 rupees, start funding think tanks. Start
Yeah.
funding, give 200 rupees a year to Op India, 200 rupees a year, and we have 1.3 billion people.
I think that's
Even
very
if
good advice.
even if 10% of this gives that, we can fund the biggest think tanks in the in the world, but we don't have that, and you have to accept it. Our PhDs just don't have that kind of rigor. I mean,
Hmm.
have you spoken to our PhDs? We allow 30% plagiarism, somebody was telling me.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah, I mean, it's ridiculous. I have seen the content that we have. There are hardly anybody, and all the good Hindu intellectuals, all the good Hindu intellectual work. Again, I said Makarand Paranjpe, Sitaram Goel, Ram Swarup, Arun Shori. You can count it on your fingertips. All the new good Hindu work that is coming out, right, is coming from North America again.
Yeah.
Rajiv ji, Rajiv
Yeah.
Malhotra comes from North America. You have Vamsi Jewelry, North America.
Yeah, that's true.
Vamsi wrote a
Raj
great
Vedam,
book.
who does a lot of good work on the debunking the Aryan invasion theory. I think he's from Texas.
You have some folks in Canada too that are doing great work, but you have
Mm.
to understand all these people. Vishwa Adluri, somebody mentioned. Yeah, I agree. Vishwa has done a great job. Vishwa, I've read Vishwa Adluri's book too. I need to get him on the podcast too. Amazing guy, fascinating. He uses postmodernism to deconstruct
Mm.
them. Which I mean, I may not agree at a personal level. Oh, who cares? You're using their theory to screw them. I'm more than
Yeah.
happy. So that's what I'm saying. So to reach the level of guys, you are not going to reach the level of Sam Harris and Jordan Peterson. Just stop thinking about it. You know what? How many of you have even bothered to read one book of Makarand Paranjpe?
Yeah.
You
That's
have a
true.
guy who's written 45 books. How many of you even
He's written
knew?
45 books?
Yes,
Damn, I didn't
45.
even know that.
How many research papers has he published? And when Makaranji keeps on using this word called intermedial hermeneutics, how many even
Hmm.
understand what that is? How many on his Twitter timeline, whenever he has used the word intermedial hermeneutics, have gone and tweeted to him, sir, what does this mean?
Hmm. He said something where there was some people asking him, I have I have no idea what you're saying, and I don't know if he explained that or not. But there was one thing that I see, but I agree with you. Even me, and I've only started reading about Sitaram Goyal recently, and I've read 3 of his books recently. But even Sitaram Goyal is such a crazy good resource if you want to start knowing about Indian history. He's such a crazy good resource to start with, but I don't know how many people have read that. And I think there's also an aspect of this is something that people here also face, but people in India definitely face as well, is that, and that's something that I have a problem with. That's something that I need to just let go and just start saying, Pata nahi. I just need to start saying that in like not most, but a lot of situations, is that we tend to think that we know the answers. We like to think that we know the answers. And so whenever you're having a discussion with someone on Twitter, we will say that, yeah, I know the answer and this is the answer. And a lot of the times we don't. So I think even in a lot of discussions, I should just go up and say, pata nahi. Mujhe ye pata hai aur kuch pata nahi.
Yeah,
I
no,
think that's a good place to start.
I think it takes a lot of humility to say I don't know, and courage. People
Yeah.
don't realize the amount of courage needed to say I don't know. Anyway, somebody asked a question saying, why don't the BJP take the law and order seriously? Because they're idiots. That's
Yeah, because they are, because it's a big undertaking. It requires a lot of outlay, it requires a lot of structural changes, and it requires the kind of structural changes that doesn't necessarily pay off electorally in the next election cycle. Big, things that make headlines are the things that pay off in the electoral cycle. Who's going to make headlines about, oh, look how nicely the BJP is fixing the law and order situation under the behind the covers? Nobody's going to pay attention to that. So BJP doesn't pay attention to that either.
BJP doesn't pay attention to that is because nobody lobbies about law and order with the BJP.
Exactly.
I'm the only moron who cries online every day. There is no law and order in India. How many people? Okay, here's the thing. I abuse Islam or I abuse Congress. I will get 100 retweets. I say law and order is a problem in India.
Who cares?
It's a state government issue. 20 states in India are under BJP. They are not fixing it. No retweet.
Yeah, because it's not a glamorous issue. It's such an important issue. It's just not a glamorous issue. I think we might need to figure out a way to make it glamorous. That's a good question too, maybe.
To be glamorous, it's, this is the answer why India does not have folks like Jordan Peterson and Sam Harris. We're just lazy asses. That's all it is, man. Okay, next question.
Apathy.
Yeah,
apathy is a big one.
It's pathetic. Okay, Sham, why don't you interview Arun Shourie? Because Sham does not have his phone number.
Yeah, very, very. That's a very good answer. That's exactly what I was going to say. I'm happy to send him an email, but I sent a couple of people, the couple of bigger Twitter personalities, some emails, but I haven't heard back yet. So that's the reason why I haven't interviewed them yet. But I will keep trying. My dharma is to keep trying, and I will keep doing it.
I could hook you up.
Yeah. We'll get in touch after this thing, and we'll see what we can make happen.
Okay, one question is for me. Kushal, do you think we need a podcast series on Indian history like Dan Carlin's Hardcore History? I actually think we do. Maybe there might be some, if you guys want to learn about Indian philosophy, that's a brilliant podcast done by a white guy. King's College London has a history of philosophy podcast in which they have a Chinese philosophy podcast, short episodes of 20 minutes each. Really? Indian philosophy and Greek philosophy. Everybody, if you want, I can leave the link for you guys in the comment section later on. If everybody wants to take get access to that, you guys will freak out. And imagine, Goras are doing it. We don't have a good quality one. So yeah, obviously, I would have heard a podcast on Indian history and paid money for it. But you know what? Here's one guy who could actually do it. I know he could do it. There is a Twitter handle called @Kshetrajna. His name is Rangesh. How about this? You guys watch this, start tweeting to Rangesh to do a podcast series on Indian history. He is an encyclopedia of Indian history, but he's a lazy ass bugger who will not do it. And he's a friend of mine. So troll him.
Good idea.
Yeah, so I'm telling you.
That's how you get things done on Twitter. Go troll people.
Yeah. Okay, somebody asked, where did I enroll? Well, I enrolled in IGNOU, Harshit. So you can go on their website, ignou.in, and they have distance learning courses, and you guys can actually finish it.
I have a question as well for you.
Okay.
So this is like a big picture question, and I think this is one of the most important questions as far as I am concerned. How do we create that sort of a mindset or that sort of a organization where we can have these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 points that people may disagree on the minutia, people may disagree on all other things, but there are these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 points where there is a broad consensus among people that these are points that we do not compromise on. And how do we create that setup? How do we create that sort of agreement? How can we create it in the sense that it can eventually, obviously long term down the line, start being an election plank for parties? We can get this introduced in as an election plank. Like, if you want to win an election in India, you have to be unrelenting on these few topics here. How can we create that atmosphere or that sort of agreement?
Well, first of all, we have to identify what issues are there. So let's say, for example, law and order is a major issue. Law and order is something we cannot solve. The state can solve it.
Yeah.
When I say the state, I mean the central and the state governments both. And basically, the representatives of the people, they can solve it. Similarly, free speech can be solved by two ways. Now, the The usual way would be we go and lobby to our politicians. You go to your local MP and say, I want the right to speak. You don't give me the right to speak, go and talk about it in the parliament. Well, India being a feudal society, it's not going to happen. What is step two? Step two, I've already started working on it. I have read so much material on free speech as an issue. I mean, I am more than happy. I think one of the issues that the Indic collective has taken, when I say I mean Jai Deepak, they are going to take up a court case in regards to 295A and 153A for free speech too. So that would be something that I will fund personally, small amounts, monthly basis, to the Indic collective, because I feel passionately about it. So I believe there are areas. I have already spoken to many people about this. We can identify areas. In some areas, we will have to tell the government to basically get the hell out of our lives, like temples.
Temples, yeah. I was just going to say that.
There might be some issues where we might have to tell the government to take care and do a better job, like policing. And I believe policing and free speech, they are running parallel. We need good policing and more free speech. And more free speech can only come when there is more policing. We need law and order and policing and judicial reforms, obviously. So there are these issues. And secondly, if you're on Twitter, there is at least a 15 to 20% crowd that is financially well settled now in India, in the Twitter Janta or in the Facebook Janta or the YouTube Janta. I think we need to start funding things. We have to start funding. I know, I'm not going to say that a Ved Pathshala is not important. It must be important for far more people than I think it is. But my point is that we live in a democracy, right? We have to win battles legally through legislation or through cases. We need to win those battles, man. We have to start thinking on these issues. Otherwise, we are screwed. And I believe this. The country is improving on socioeconomic parameters. But when it comes to freedom, I believe India has become worse. And this is not because of the BJP, don't get me wrong. I think year after year, the amount of free speech we have in India is reducing. It's a cause for worry.
I think it's down to straight up apathy. I think it's down to straight up apathy of the people. The government is a representation of the people. If we say that the BJP is apathetic, if we say that the Congress is apathetic, why? Who allows them to be apathetic?
I don't know, man.
We allow them to be apathetic. That's what it is.
It's obvious, and I always say this to people: why do you want to have an opinion on everything? Like, I don't have an opinion on many things. If you see my Twitter timeline, it's basically going to be usually free speech, free speech, free speech. I keep crying about free speech, or I'll see some stupid political thing and or otherwise I'm actually having fun with other people online. Like today I was trolling Alok Bhatt about his salt. So I mean, I don't know. I'm not an expert on a lot of things. I read very specific issues. I read a lot of philosophy. So my whole point is, people who are watching this live too, why don't you pick one subject, read like freaking 100 books on that, become an expert on that, and then come on my show and Sham's show and teach us. Who's stopping you from doing it? And don't tell me you don't have time. It's not like मैं वेला बैठा हूँ इधर. I have nothing to do. So Sham and I, we don't have jobs or anything. Everybody has jobs, man. Everybody's got a life, but you have to prioritize. Even if you read 1 hour daily, believe me, you can finish off one book in a week by reading 1 hour daily. Come on, you cannot take 1 hour out. Tweet less.
I think that's so true.
Less. Listen to more podcasts. I always say this to people. Twitter, you just read some articles, tweet here and there. You have to have a 30-minute window for Twitter and Facebook. Get out of there. Then consume more podcasts. I consume 3 to 4 hours of podcasts daily. I get to learn so much. I mean, one podcast of Sam Harris teaches me far more. But anyways.
But that's a good point. I think I have to just quickly address that because it's such a good point that you're making, because that's something that I was guilty of initially when I joined Twitter. Like I said before, I'm very new to Twitter. So when I came to Twitter, I said, I need to learn everything about everything. And that's literally impossible. So off late, I've started to realize a lot of people came to me and said, make a video, make a detailed in-depth analysis of the Sabarimala issue. And I said, look, honestly, I don't know enough. And honestly, that's not something maybe it sounds horrible, but that's not something I'm concerned with at this moment. I have other concerns. I like reading about consciousness, for example. I like reading about Kashmiri Hindus and Kashmir, for example. So those are things that I want to sort of talk more about. But what can we do about Kashmir? What can we do about the issue of Islam and Islamism? And what is the future of Islam vis-a-vis Hinduism? Those are the things that interest me more. So I think personally, I think it's a good idea to, I'm not saying don't have an opinion on anything else, but I'm just saying that it's good, it's a smart thing to focus on some core things that you're deeply passionate about, and then work on that, become an expert in that area, and then teach other people. I think that's a great point.
Yeah, I guess it is what it is. At the end of the day in life, you have to take your stuff seriously. Like, I try to pick one subject. This is what I usually do, how I read. So nowadays I'm reading a lot of books on consciousness. So I was going to read Michael Pollan, so I put Michael Pollan behind. What I did was I read Dan Dennett a while ago, and then I stopped reading Dan Dennett. So then I read Robert Sapolsky. Then I read Metzinger. Now I'm reading. I keep forgetting that author's name. That's how many
What's
books.
a good book that that speaks against this theory that there's no such thing? What's a good book on that?
No. So see, in on when it comes to consciousness, right? So there is the Dan Dennett version, right? The Dan Dennett
Okay.
version is based out of materialism. So consciousness
Yeah.
is basically an output or a product of your brain. So so consciousness comes after matter arises. The more materialist, my school of thought, right? Cārvāka say there is no consciousness outside. There is no global consciousness, and you tap into it, which is the sort of the other view. Then you can
Dan
read.
Dennett used
Dan Dennett uses the Cārvāka materialist version. He says there is no real hard problem of consciousness, basically. So that's the Dan Dennett view. Now, the book I'm reading right now is basically the Australian philosopher. क्या यार मेरे को उसका नाम ही नहीं याद रहता.
I thought Chalmers was Australian, no?
Chalmers, yeah, Chalmers. So I'm going to read Chalmers now. I'm reading Chalmers right now. Chalmers basically has the completely opposite view. He says that his point is he keeps on harping on experience. So he says whatever Dennett talks about is basically the third person view, and the third person experience can be explained by, oh, you do fMRI scan and this neuron is firing, this neuron is firing, this is happening, that is happening, and that is the answer. But that does not explain the experience. Now, something that Dennett would say is that is the whole experience. There is no such thing as experience separately. But Chalmers says, no, there is something more. So I'm reading more. So I'm actually just around chapter 4. So
I think that's why you'll find Michael Pollan's book very interesting, because it goes from a very Dennett style to a more Chalmers sort of ideology. He makes that journey. That's what I find so interesting, because he said that came through a direct experience. So now again, how do you define that experience? But it's interesting. It's a very interesting book in that sense.
Yeah, it is interesting, but I just don't buy it, because see what's happening in your brain at that point of time when you consume psychedelics is out of your control, right? So there is no way. There is no way to gauge what's happening when you are on LSD or DMT. There is no way to analyze it. So as far as I'm concerned, like if you remember our DM conversation, I told you there's basically no answer to consciousness. Nobody knows. No, and if everybody says we don't know, that means philosophy departments, 50% of them will be shut down.
Yeah.
So basically,
but that's part of philosophy. Won't you think? The idea of not knowing and wanting to know and wanting to explore more, because it's possible that you just run into a dead end, but it's also possible that you might not. And won't you say that that's a possibility worth exploring with an open mind?
It is. That's why I'm reading Chalmers too. I say I don't know anything about consciousness. I have no answer. I can only give a guess that consciousness arises after matter arises. That's my guess. And what happens after I die? How do I know? I mean, I'm dead, right?
Yeah.
I can't answer for that. I mean, so everything is at the level of conjecture, but I don't know. So anyways, so it is what it is, as they say. So we are stuck in that. Okay, somebody has said, don't you find it ironic that the country where Indus Valley exists is also being made infamous for open defecation and uncleanliness particularly? Why is it ironic? I mean, I don't see anything ironic in it. See, I don't know how clean the Indus Valley people were. I all I see is my people.
We weren't there.
Yeah, I was not there. I don't know if they were pooping on the streets or not. See,
Yeah.
if the answer is they are pooping on the streets because there are less number of washrooms, it's true. Actually, I don't want to put. I hate it when people put our people down. I mean, we were so poor. I mean, we were a garib country, man, and I think
And the thing,
Modi's greatest legacy. I will vote for Modi in 2019 because of Swachh Bharat.
yeah,
That is how I believe.
yeah. I think it's we often tend to forget how insanely overpopulated we are as a country as well. Like, it's a 1.2 billion people in a country that's one third, I think, the size of the United States. And we say, oh, and people in America say how populated their country is, but we are 1.2 billion people crammed into a space that is one third of the United States. It's a big country, I get it, but still, we've just gone from 0 to 100 in terms of bloody population in a very short span of time, in less than a century, much less than a century. So there are obviously it's our fault that we've overloaded ourselves like this. So there's going to be some problems with that in that case. And again, it's going to be a slow process fixing those issues as well.
Yeah, there's a famous Russell Peters joke. It's like India could do with a few homos.
Yeah, it really could, man. Decriminalize it. That's what I say. Bloody decriminalize it. Let him go at it. Let him go at it. Help us with the bloody population problem.
Okay, somebody. Okay, Bonnie John. Yeah, hi Bonnie. How are you? Okay, your take on free speech at workplace. Free speech at workplace, where it's very simple. I mean, I can give you the American version. In America, private enterprises are considered an individual. So if you're in a workplace and your speech causes harm to their business model in any way, I believe they should be allowed to fire you. You can say what you want to say, but I mean, it's the risk you're taking, in my view. I mean, I'm self-employed, so I can say basically whatever I want to say. I'm my own boss. But yeah, if you're doing a corporate job, please go after people on Twitter by anonymous handles or say nothing that is not beyond the bounds of decency. So I would take the route two. If I was in a corporate job, I would ask serious questions, but within the bounds of civility. And I think it's all good then. There is no problem. What's your take?
That's exactly my take. I mean, why would you even the other aspect of this? Why would you want to, speak to somebody on Twitter in a way that would get you fired anyway? Like, if you're asking questions, even if you're asking questions, uncomfortable questions, but they're being asked in a civilized manner, people wouldn't necessarily get upset unless they're stupid, and there are a lot of people like that on Twitter. But still, I don't think, in generally speaking, going through life, there is a need to go out of your way to be an asshole to somebody on social media.
Yeah, you know what? Something very nice Nirmala Sitharaman had once said on an event organized by a BJP friendly group, Twitter group, and somebody asked her, how should we behave on social media? Nirmala Sitharaman said something amazing. She said, think twice before you tweet. Before you tweet, read your tweet at least 3 times again.
Yeah.
The probabilities of you messing up on Twitter will reduce by 95%.
That's so true, though. That's so true.
I took that advice seriously.
It's so true, because the thing is, it's very symptomatic of the kind of stuff that we do on social media now. You go on YouTube, okay? You go on YouTube, and once you start sort of perusing through the more popular politics-based videos, around 80% of those videos are Ben Shapiro destroys idiot feminist, or some guy destroys fat liberal, or something like that. Every video is like this. This is what people want for some reason. People want people to just skewer some person. They don't want to see that, oh, Ben Shapiro has actually a fantastic conversation with a feminist. Nobody will watch that video. People want to watch it. It's like it's like the social media version of the Colosseum in Rome. People want to see blood. People are the audience sitting in the social media Colosseum watching and screaming for blood. That's what we want to see. That's the 21st version of the Colosseum. It's a strange thing.
Yeah, it is. Okay, somebody said, as a conservative, how does one negotiate with absolute liberty? Okay, when you say absolute liberty, who's Spoonbill? I don't know what their name is. Okay, you don't need to disclose your name. Okay, here's my answer to this. Absolute liberty. Okay, liberty obviously has its boundaries, right? When you're inside your house, you've created this concept of owning a property, right? Let us assume that it's a mythological creature that you've created, that this is your territory, this is your boundary, you have paid for it. So inside that area, you have absolute liberty. You can do what you want to do in your house. You can dance, you can jump, you can do what you want to do. But the moment you step out of your house, you're sharing space. It's shared space. And the moment you enter a shared space, there can be no absolute liberty.
And also, can you murder somebody inside your house?
No. Again, I was just going to go there. So when you are inside your house, you have all liberty to conduct activities with consent when there is another species involved, right? Now you could say, then why not insects? Well, we don't know how to communicate with insects. So we smack them. So, and I'm not a Gyani Baba, so I can't say what to say, but I'm using my brain and trying to answer your question that, you have to delineate, you have to create, you have to make separate identities. There are public spaces, there are private spaces. So there is no such thing as absolute liberty. There is liberty and there are levels to liberty, and those levels are based on interrelationships with different people. So it is what it is. Now you give the answer, Sham.
I don't spend too much time thinking about absolute liberty anyway, so I'm just gonna go with what you said. I put in my own 2 cents as well, because I don't even know if there's such a thing that exists like absolute liberty. I don't know if that exists in any scenario. Okay. I think there's always some curb on it.
Okay, so now somebody has, the same person has asked a follow-up. Then how do you make an argument for absolute free speech? Okay, I'll tell you. The argument for absolute free speech is very simple. It is not absolute. When we say the word absolute free speech, it is very clear. You cannot call for violence. Yep. Because again, you're calling for physical harm to the other person. And obviously, even in that, you have to prove intent, that there was direct intent to cause harm to the other person.
Yep.
So you're mixing two things. Liberty has many faces. Free speech is one aspect of it. So liberty has many sides, right? Like
exactly.
Aren't temples part of your liberty? So are you going to give me an argument that the government should control your temples?
Yeah, exactly. It's a strange one. There's like you said, again, there's a curb on free speech as well. You can't call for violence. And again, in terms of free speech, I think a lot of people in India claim that you should not offend me. If you offend my culture, if you offend my sensibilities, that's where a curb on free speech should come. And that's something that we were talking about earlier that we do not disagree with. It is not a fundamental right of yours to not be offended. It's nowhere is that a right for anyone, except for maybe in Islamic countries. I don't know.
Oh, even in the temple issue, I believe, Anand had made the comment that, he's an atheist, as he has no skin in the game. No. I am an atheist. And when it comes to a temple issue, I have absolute skin in the game, because it's a question of government intervention. The government is intervening in the temple today. It could intervene in something else tomorrow. So the difference between the atheist and the theist in the temple issue is of skin in the game. And as there is the top level, according to Nassim Taleb, he calls it the soul in the game.
Yeah.
So believers have soul in the game. Atheists have skin in the game. That's the difference. So you guys, most of you guys who watch me, who I know are believers in God, because you abuse me half of the time about my disbelief in God, but you guys have soul in the game in that issue. I have skin in the game in that issue. So I disagree with Anand on that one. So,
how much of that do you get? How much of that do you get from people that, do you get a lot of abuse that you don't believe that? I find that so strange.
Oh, right.
Who cares?
My Twitter mentions are full of Cārvākas are not Hindus. They keep on going after me. And
What makes them? What makes them? It's so I don't believe that. Why do people? It's so strange. It leaves me at a loss of words. Like, why do people care so much if one guy sitting in his house is like, I don't believe in anything? Okay, live your life. What is the need to take time out of your day to go and say something to that person? It's such a strange thing. I don't know. Maybe it's just me. I don't know.
no, it's just some people have a problem, and it's okay. I don't care. I don't get bothered by it. It's not like I'm having sleepless nights
I
over
know, but
somebody.
still, I just think it's such a strange thing that somebody thinking that Batman is better than Superman affects your life so much that you have to go to the comment section and say, no, this is why Superman is better, and you're a bad person if you think otherwise. Like, how unhappy are you in your life, man? What happened?
I don't know. See, okay, here's the thing. People find it very confusing. Somebody, Jitu, okay, this is for you, Jitu. You, I would request you, please don't, you know, label me. Let me speak and label me myself. Okay, I'll tell you why I'm as rabid as it gets when it comes to atheism, Jitu. But there is a difference between what kind of a atheist I am and what kind of a atheist others are. I am not a I hate God atheist. I can't hate something that I believe most probably does not exist. It's irrational.
Would you say then that you're an agnostic atheist? Is that a thing, or you just say that I know for a fact that it's not there? Isn't that what atheists think? Again,
Okay.
I'm not as well versed on this terminology.
Okay, let me take a couple of minutes to explain what atheism and agnosticism is. Okay, agnosticism was a term developed by someone called Huxley. So the
Hmm.
difference between atheism and agnosticism is very basic. So atheism says that the probabilities that science will eventually prove that God does not exist are good. The agnostic says
Okay.
science will never be able to prove that there is a God. Now, if anybody has read God Delusion has this thing, a 1 to 7 scale, right? Where it's called the Dawkins scale. So Dawkins, where
Hmm.
1 being there is almost certainly a God, and 7 being is almost certainly no God.
Hmm.
Dawkins places himself as a 6.8 or a 6.7. I don't remember exactly. I would
Okay.
place myself as a 5.5 or 6.
Okay.
I'm not as rabid as Dawkins. In fact, I would culturally associate with a lot of Hindu practices too. I see no divinity in it. I just like them aesthetically. बहुत अच्छी हैं. I mean, I just like the aesthetic aspect of it. And people who keep accusing me so many things, they don't realize I have converted 100 people to Hinduism. How many have you done?
But what I find funny with that also is that, if you are going to somebody who says that I don't know for a fact that there exists something called, again, a God, we're using a very tainted word anyway, but still, if somebody's saying something like that, if you're going to go abuse that person, if you're going to go deride that person, how is that going to help your cause and your case? Do you think that person is going to say, oh no, you're right, thank you for abusing me, now I completely agree with you? When has that ever happened in the history of mankind?
No. So here's my thing. The biggest reason I'm worried about is, see, when Rajiv Malhotra ji wrote that book, Invade. No, which one was his last book? The Battle for Sanskrit.
Battle for Sanskrit, yeah.
Battle for Sanskrit, where he coined the term Cārvāka 2.0 and he called Sheldon Pollock a Cārvāka 2.0. I personally felt betrayed. I'll tell you why
Hmm.
I feel betrayed. Now, there might be people who think Charvakas are not Hindu, whatever, whatever. It's okay. They are entitled to their views and they can say it to my face too. I will not feel disturbed or irritated by that. But I'm concerned about a certain direction in which upper middle class English speaking kids are going. They're going into what I call Abrahamic atheism.
Yeah.
I don't want them to go there. I just want them to stay in our family.
Yeah.
It matters to me. And the moment you start abusing charvakas, you demean them, you don't help my cause. So I don't say don't do it. I say you're not helping me and you're not helping your own cause by doing this. I personally try and convince people to bring them back into the Sanatan Dharam family. Now,
Yeah.
Sanatan Dharam is not a monopoly of the Astikas alone. the Nastikas were defeated intellectually according to the Astikas. Maybe, they were not defeated intellectually, but just like what's happening in the West, have you ever realized atheists don't reproduce a lot in comparison to theists? Has anybody given that a thought?
But I don't know. It's possible, and I agree with your sentiment there completely, because it's a strange thing when you have a group of people that are very much part of the Sanatan fabric, very much part of the fabric. They might have disagreements with some of the aspects of that fabric, but they're still part of it. But if you're going to walk around saying, it's the same thing that happened, Ashish, I'll give you an example of this. Ashish Dhar, he has a video on YouTube that people should go and watch. I think it's for the Center of Indic Studies, where he was talking about the history of Kashmir. And in that video, he said that there was this king, in the 15th, 13th, 12th century, something like that. There was a king I think he was a Muslim, but he identified with Hindu philosophy and identified with Hindu culture and identified with Hindu ideas and traditions a lot more. And so he wanted to become the king, and he wanted to become a bona fide Hindu. He said, whatever ceremony you have to do to make me one, make me one. But then some people during that time said, no, you cannot become one because you are not one. You are not part of this fabric. And so that guy remained a Muslim, and that guy then started promulgating sort of Islamic ideas in Kashmir. And I'm not saying that's responsible for the Islamization of Kashmir, but it's got to play a part if he's the king. So that's a good example. Like, who are you, and what gives you that kind of authority to say that, okay, you are not part of the system, even if you want to be? You want to be part of the system, you consider yourself part of the system, but somebody comes around and tells you, no, get out, you're not part of the system. How is that helpful in any way?
It may not be helpful, but they have every right to consider me as an outsider, and I'm not part of the system. I in a very odd way, as a free speech guy, I will stand up for the right to throw me outside.
That's fine. No, I understand that, but I'm just saying that you talk about this. Everybody loves to talk about this, this Hindu solidarity and this oneness that we should have at some basic level, and that you don't even afford people that want to be part of that oneness that simple opportunity just to be part of that oneness. Isn't that's such a big contradiction?
It is, but that's not for me to bother myself about. It's for them, who
I know. I think it's their problem.
It's about the ones. Okay, so somebody has asked one more question, and we've reached 1 hour and 50 minutes, so I think we'll keep this as the last 5-7 minutes. I know everybody's having fun, but it's almost 2 hours. So Kushal and Sham bhai, to both of you, can you both recommend 5 books for beginners to understand topics like free speech, postmodernism, atheism, liberalism? This would be my last question. So, okay, I'll take this up, I guess.
I have a smaller recommendation. So I don't know that many books on postmodernism and free speechism, but I would recommend to everyone just one small thing. Go read every book on the Voice of India website. Every book is free. You can download it on your phone. You can probably read each book in a day. Just go read that. That'll give you so much perspective on India's history and India's culture. That's my recommendation to everyone off the bat.
Okay, fair enough. So, okay, topics like free speech. I think free speech pay better than books. I would recommend videos. So if you guys go to Rubin Report, Dave Rubin has had 2-3 discussions recently with lawyers on the concept of free speech, and where they give the philosophical arguments behind free speech. Then if needed, what I'll do is I'll start sharing some articles on the thread of this video. I'll share a few articles on free speech and its importance, because believe me, you don't need to read a book. I mean, if you want to read a book, then you can read John Stuart Mill on liberty. It's a very small booklet. Read John Stuart Mill. So that's on free speech. Postmodernism. Why would you want to learn postmodernism? It's the most garbage thing on planet Earth.
I've never been able to make it through a book, so I'm actually not very well read.
So postmodernism, I mean, basically it's Jacques Derrida, Michel Foucault, and all that gang. And
I started Michel Foucault, couldn't finish it.
Because it means nothing. Imagine it took me freaking 1 month to read a book by Jordan Peterson. It was just a word salad. So, Useless. Don't waste your time. On atheism, yeah. Now I can recommend you a lot of books on atheism. So on the Indic end, I would recommend, uh, there is a style of writing, and I'm going to take 2-3 minutes. You have to understand there is no book on atheism in the real sense, because whatever you know about the Charvakas in the Indian darshanas is via Purva Paksh. So whatever you know the Charvakas stood for is what the Buddhists said about them, what the Advaitins said about them, what Madhavacharya said about them in the Sarvadarshana Sangraha in the first chapter. That's all you know. Let's take the only atheist book available, or the Lokayat or the Charvak or the semi-Lokayat Charvak book available is the Tattva Paplava Simha by Jersi Bhatta. Even that is written in a format which is, I think in Sanskrit it's called Vitanda or Vitanda. I don't know how to pronounce it properly. But what that format is, it is basically taking the Mickey out of all the other darshanas without saying what it stands for. So we literally know nothing from the first person point of view what the Charvak Darshana was all about. It is all conjecture at best or on based out of the Purva Paksha. So if you want to read anything, the only book I can recommend to you is Tattva Paplava Simha by Jeresi Bhatta on the Indic side of materialism. Or there are some other books which can be recommended, but I'll have to look up my library. I have 2-3 other books. I will share a few YouTube videos about Charvaka too. If you guys want it, I will share them too later on in the comment section. Then on the Western side, if you want to understand atheism on the Western side, I mean, read Richard Dawkins, Christopher Hitchens, Sam Harris, Daniel Dennett. I mean, one good book. Okay, how about this? Peter Boghossian, The Manual for Creating Atheists. A good book. Read all of that. All of you should read that book. A Manual for Creating Atheists by Peter Boghossian. On liberalism, I mean, again, what do you want to know about liberalism? If you want to understand liberalism, then you can read John Stuart Mill, John Locke, all those guys, and you'll find a lot of their views also objectionable. You have to understand liberalism is not a static philosophy. It has come a long way. Like most people don't realize that John Stuart Mill was a blank slate guy. He thought the mind was a blank slate. He thought biology did not play any role. So you will never agree with one author. Like I don't agree with many aspects of Charvak too. Like Charvaki Kyapsa, what is the shlok I have as the main screenshot of my channel? That Yava Jivet, Sukham Jivet. That one. Basically, what would Charvak say? Have ghee, take loans, live your life, basically drown yourself in debt. Who cares? We will die. I can't say that now. I have a family. So you have to evolve. There is no such thing as a fixed ideology. So it depends on what you want to read. I mean, on liberalism, you can read John Stuart Mill. I think On Liberty is a good starting point on liberalism. Otherwise, I can recommend a few books on liberalism too. If you really want to understand Western thought and how these go, Westerners think, read Jonathan Haidt. That's a good author to read. Read Jonathan Haidt. He's a good guy if you want to understand them. Otherwise, it's endless. You can read so many of them, and it's impossible. Like I read a few paragraphs of Friedrich Nietzsche. I mean, I started sleeping after a while. Kitna padega? Yeah. You can't. There's an end to it. I enjoy reading Hindu philosophers. And people will find hard to believe that my thoughts have actually come out of reading Hindu philosophy. I've hardly read Western philosophy. So anyways, so I think we'll wrap things up. We've almost now have had this conversation for 1 hour and 53 minutes. So to everybody who watched this, thanks a lot. To everybody who's going to watch it later on, thanks a lot to you too. And finally, a big thank you to Sham. And before we wrap things up, guys, subscribe to his channel if you have not. Watch his videos. He's a good guy. And the day he opens his Patreon account, I have promised him I will be the first person to start funding and financially supporting his channel. So Sham, once again, thanks a lot for coming on this show.
Hey, thank you very much for the conversation. I had a really good time, and again, thank you for having me. We should do this again soon.
All right, buddy. Take care. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye-bye.